Hi, I'm Emily.
And I'm Clark.
On Sailing Vessel Temptress.
And this is our July 2020 Adventure Log.
We are currently in the Turks and Caicos. Last time we talked to you, it was in Georgetown, and a lot has happened since then. And we've traveled a long way since then, so this might end up being a double adventure log because I think it's going to take a long time just to get you caught up on where we've been and everything that's happened in the past month.
We had to stop doing videos for a while because, we're out here where we don't have good internet, and honestly, we are swamped just keeping ourself going. It's been a rough month and a rough trip, but we've been updating on Patreon, so for our patrons on Patreon, you kind of know what's going on. Well, here's the full story to the text we've been sending.
So we started in Georgetown, and we revved up the engine to get ready to go, and the engine didn't start. I think you've probably seen that video by now. And we had to have a friend ship in a part. So why don't you give us an update on engine?
Well, it turns out when I put the engine in last, I put an oil absorber under the engine. The idea is if it leaks oil, it'll catch the oil. Yay, the environment loves me. The environment wouldn't have loved me because what happened was the oil absorber touched the oil pan and the vibration caused it to kind of remove the paint. Also, the oil absorber absorbed a small amount of salt water and wicked it right up to the engine, so that caused rust. So we rusted a hole in the bottom of the oil pan with the safety device. So I've taken the engine out, I've removed the oil pan, I put a new oil pan in, which was a joy to get imported. I repaired the old one, so we have another one with JB weld and fiberglass and everything, so we should be ready if this ever happens again, but I hope it never happens again. And we now have an engine that holds oil well, and it's good to go. Put it back in, and putting an engine back into a boat isn't just a matter of dropping it in. It has to be aligned perfectly, and it seems as though you get it aligned perfectly, then you go out and sail, and it moves around a little on its mounts, and then you have to align it a little better. So I've been down there like 5 times, often in very rough anchorages, lifting the engine and adjusting it and putting it back down. But it seems pretty good now. We've been motoring with it in some really rough conditions, and it's doing well. So I'm going to call that job done.
So when we finally were able to leave Georgetown, our first stop was Rum Cay. And now we are one of 5 boats going from Georgetown to Luperon. The first 2 boats have already made it down to Luperon. It was rough, but they made it, and it was pretty fairly easily. So then we have right behind them in 3rd place is our friends Steve and Jan on Little Sister. In 4th place is Dale and Chris on 6th Girl, and then we're the ones bringing up the rear on Temptress. So we've got these other 3 boats. Remember that because it's going to become more important later in the story.
And all the time, as time marches on, the conditions are getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So it's getting tougher to make eastward travel.
Yeah, but first, we had a really awesome time at Rum Cay.
Yes.
We have a couple friends, Ed and Carol, on a boat called Dolphin, who are 2 of the most happy, positive people I think we've ever met. And they live a very intentional life and don't give a crap what anybody thinks about them. They're kind of, they're just really amazing, interesting people. And we hadn't had a time to really hang out with them during all the COVID lockdown, so we decided to make a date that we were going to spend a few days together with them at Rum Cay.
And they decided to get married. And they decided to get married basically like we decided to get married. So we kind of, Emily wrote a song, and we kind of did the officiating, if it were, not that it was officiated. We used an old tradition. If 2 people decided they really wanted to be married, they would put down a broom, jump over the broom together, and that was the sign that they were married.
And it's been used in time of slavery. It's been used lots of times, but it's basically we are married, even if nobody else in the world recognizes that we're married. We are married.
So if you've ever heard the term "jump the broom," that's what it means. And Ed and Carol jumped to the broom on Rum Cay.
Yeah, and it was a great time. And on top of that, we, every night they made dinner or we made dinner. We, cooked for each other. We went snorkeling. We went for walks on the beach. But it was just us four on this part of the island.
And then the wind came up.
And then the wind came up and things started to go south.
Yeah, it got really rocky in there. And it's a bay you can't get out of except at perfect light because there's just coral heads everywhere. So we had to camp out there for 2 days and then get ourselves out and move to another anchorage, which honestly wasn't any better. We spent half the night at a new anchorage. 3 in the morning, we raised sail and pulled out of there. And we had conditions where we might have been able to make a place called Samana. And I really wanted to. And temperature sails upwind well, so I thought I could. And we started out, we were doing gangbusters. Except that the conditions got heavier and heavier and the wind curved more and more south, and there were thunderstorms. We lost a solar panel, got blown right off the boat. We had waves coming over the bow. It was kind of rough. And then it was like, we're not going to make Samana, but we can make Atwood. All right, so for another hour or two, we're going to make Atwood. Now we're not going to make Atwood. Okay, this is kind of my last chance without getting ridiculous. We can make
Crooked Island.
The northwest corner of Crooked Island has a little protection, so we go for that. And we went and went and went. We got a thunderstorm like I've not really seen. It blew 50 knots, and it sustained that energy for like a half hour.
And it was quick. We had all the sails up. We were not ready for this storm. It was like 25 knots, 30 knots, and we're like, okay, this is good.
Realize we've been having thunderstorms all day.
Yeah, the day before, it's just crazy. And then all of a sudden it was just like slam, 50 knots, and the whole boat went whoosh.
Yeah. By the time I got the sails down, the last sail I dropped was the main. The main had tattered itself to shreds. The solar arch had pulled up out of its pins. I should have pinned these fittings, but I just used set screws. Anyway, it pulled the set screws, stripped them right out, went up, and then came down real hard and broke a couple welds, so I'm going to have to re-weld that. Right now it's all tied together with string every which way to hold it together.
And then for half an hour he was just at the wheel, and I was just saying, the boat will not tip over, the boat will not tip over.
Push the engine for all it can do, and we were traveling at like 1.1 knots, just half of walking speed.
And we already had missed our first 2 targets, and it was like, we can't get blown anymore, or there's not land there.
Yeah. So we got in behind, it's just a beach that you could get in behind, and we got in behind the beach, and the waves start calming down, and then we put the anchor down, and right after we put the anchor down, the storm was over.
Yeah. And then we came down below, and it was like somebody just poured buckets of water on everything, every couch, every cushion.
Computer hard drives.
Cameras got wet. Everything was so wet. And my bunk was the driest place on the boat, my twin bunk, so we both kind of sat head to foot there for a while where we just kind of calmed down. It was the worst day. The worst day. And then, until then, and little did we know, so we still had internet miraculously, so we were updating our friends Dale and Chris and the folks in Luperon who have a WhatsApp group, so we're all staying in contact. And in fact, right before then, I had gotten internet, messaged Dale, and he said, there's storms throwing all around your area. And it was like, okay, cool. I saw that message, put the phone down back in the Ziploc bag, and all of a sudden, woof, we had it. So afterwards, I messaged him back to say, we just got one of those, and here's what happened. And he replies like, LOL. I was like, what is LOL? He's like, our mizzen mast just fell off. Their mizzen mast just crashed down.
They were so lucky it didn't kick out and jump into the cockpit because, it's 20 feet of aluminum telephone pole. It could have killed somebody easily.
It was crazy. And so that happened that day. And then, so Steve on Little Sister Boat number 3, they don't have communication. They were in the Turks and Caicos for a long time getting an engine fix that had already failed. They didn't have communication. All we had was their spot. So we could see a little red dot. If we had internet, we could see a little red dot of where they were last checked in. And so very soon after that, we were checking in on them, and their little red dot was really close to Luperon. But it was 6 hours ago they were really close to Luperon, and nobody in Luperon had heard from them. So we found out the story later, but their engines failed again.
Both of them.
Both of them.
Catamaran, 2 engines.
Their roller furler flew off, and Steve, who's 72, is like struggling to get them all down, and their steerage was
The
like
roller
everything was
furler
wrong.
holds the mast forward, so they couldn't. The mast could have come down. The big
Yeah.
mast.
So it was just absolutely crazy, and then they had to call the Navy, the Armada in Luperon, and so the Navy's coming out, and the Navy runs aground, and the Navy gets caught in a fishing net, and the Navy can't get out to him. So boat number 1, prehab, they revved up their engines, their little motor yacht, and they went out to help rescue him.
10-foot seas, 20 knot winds, current, bad conditions.
So all this happens within the span of a day or two, and we're just looking at each other like, should we continue going toward Luperon? Because obviously something is telling us that there's some curse or something, that not good things are happening to all of us.
And then the next day, the hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
So the next day we find out there's a hurricane coming towards us. A full-on, looks like hurricane.
Which is another message. We're just like, LOL. This can't get any worse.
And it was poorly forecasted in the models, or differently forecast. So some say that's going to miss you, it's going to go right over you, it's going to be small, it's going to be huge.
But it was moving fast. We knew that.
It was really moving fast, like crazy. It hadn't even really formed yet. The models had it traveling the whole Atlantic Ocean and coming right at us. So we had to take it seriously, and we had to decide, do we continue on to the Turks and Caicos, which is the only place that had any hope of protection, or do we go back to Georgetown? We know that very well, and we know we can get protection.
And we have a hurricane plan there.
Yes. But then we probably would never have gone back this direction again. So we decided to press on one more day and then make another decision. So we pulled out and we went to Atwood.
Yes, and 35 knots of thunderstorms the whole way.
Yeah, and we're beating into it with the engine pushed hard enough to go 7 knots, and we're doing 2.5, sometimes 3, just crawling forward, going over waves, water running right down the deck, going right through waves.
But we figured if we
tough
could get to
conditions.
Atwood, we could at least pull out the mainsail and see if we could stitch it together enough that we could sail in the future.
Yeah, but we got to Atwood and there was so much wind, there was no dealing with the
no.
sail. You just couldn't do it.
Yeah. So then we're looking at the weather again, and it's like, did we just make this trip around from Crooked to Acklands for nothing? Because are we going to have to go back to Georgetown? Because now the hurricane is most definitely going to hit Turks and Caicos.
So we started negotiating with someone that might have marina space for us. And we decided we're going to take a shot at it. And we take off, and we had a really tough, long day getting to Maguana. And slept for a few hours there, took off in the middle of the night, and we had slightly better conditions, but a much longer trip to the Turks and Caicos, but beautifully just enough wind angle that we could have head sails on.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
So it let us go a lot faster, and we got there.
But this whole time we as soon as we lost Atwood, we lost communication. So we were hoping that we were going to have a marina space when we got to Turks and Caicos.
So we got to the Turks and Caicos, found on a chart where someone had started building a marina and then the project failed, so there were no docks, but there was a marina basin. So we went in and anchored there for the night, and it's like, this is perfect. It's totally protected. We could do the hurricane here, but it was too far out. There was no cell phone, no way of knowing the weather. So we decided to press on, and the next day we went in closer to civilization, to Provo. We found another marina, because the first one ended up, they didn't have any room. And we probably found the only other place in the whole country that Temptress could have been protected. Tied to a wall in there. We had to check in and out of the country, so we had to pay that expense.
And at that point, we realized that we were having radio problems, because you're supposed to call Provo radio when you get 12 miles out from Turks and Caicos, because they see you on a radar, and you have to check in with them. And we called them and called them and called them, and they didn't hear us. And we heard little pops and scratches of them coming back. And so our radio's wet, too. So it's just one thing after another.
I really don't know what happened there, because it seems to be sort of working now.
Yeah, it's kind of dried out, but
we'll figure that out.
Anyway, so we tied to a wall.
Uh-huh.
We checked in Turks and Caicos. The immigration customs guys were awesome, super friendly.
Yeah. We took on fuel, but that's all we could do, because part of the conditions of us coming in, because we were coming in as an emergency, we didn't have valid COVID tests, and there's some insurance you have to have right now that gets you out of the country, because they're a really small country with very little medical facilities.
So we couldn't step off the boat.
So we couldn't step off the boat. So we just had to sit on the boat and wait for the hurricane to come. And the hurricane came over us. It blew 75 to 80. We watched it coming, and it was still blowing and still blowing, but the forecast showed it should have been past us. So I switched to real-time satellite imagery, and I could see it stalled. It's just stalled. And we found out later on it was a tropical storm, and it came to us and stopped and built right on our position until it was a Category 1, and then proceeded to move on, strangely, to Georgetown, which was our other choice. So it was going to hit both of them.
So we just sat in the boat all night. You know, we were against the dock with fenders. One of the fenders popped, another one came out, so we have a big scar on the side of the boat. Nothing else really got hurt.
The boat won't sink or anything. It's just paint, really.
But we just were awake all day and all night just watching the wind come up and come down, and just the howling and the sounds of being in a boat during that kind of storm freak you out more than anything. It's like we knew we were on a wall, we knew we were safe, we knew that we were going to expect 50 to 75 knots of wind. Like, we knew what was expected, but just enduring the howling and the pitch changing and then whoosh and then whoosh.
The wind angle at one point when it was blowing like 60 in our bay, we were behind a hill, and it was still blowing like 60, was just at the wrong angle to the mast. And if you've ever taken like a piece of grass and made a whistle out of it, you know, you blow over something and it vibrates. Well, the mast will do that, and it's called pumping.
The whole boat just goes like this,
and it shakes the whole boat like a lot. And you wonder if the mast is going to fall down.
Yeah, it was just not. If we had any option to spend that storm on shore, we would have, but we just couldn't get off the boat. I would never want to spend a storm in the boat again. It's just the psychology of it. The stress of it is. I knew the boat was going to be fine. I knew the boat wasn't going to tip over. I knew we were going to survive it all and everything. But just it was just torture. It's like being in a big box and just being shaken up and howled at.
Yeah, it was an exhausting. Well, it's been an exhausting month, but it was an exhausting week. Well, after the storm, did we get the groceries? I guess we got the groceries before. We met a local guy through Dale and Chris, who did some legwork for us because we couldn't get off the boat. So we got some green vegetables and some, treats that we haven't had for a while because we've been at sea.
And he has a canal outside the back of his property where he let Dale and Chris tie up, but the only one fit there. And
well, we're too deep. We couldn't have made it.
So we couldn't go there anyway. So it was kind of cool to have Dale and Chris weathering the storm within a few miles of us. We felt like we were doing it together, even though we haven't seen them since, in person since Georgetown, but we're kind of doing this together, which is a good feeling. Makes you feel less alone.
We waited till things calmed down a bit. We waited till high tide because we can't get out of that marina entrance at low tide. And we pulled out. We kind of had to do this quickly, too, because there's some rules about how long you can be checked in without having to buy $300 worth of cruising permit and all kinds of things. So out we went, right under the wire. Checked out with some cool officials that came to us, same guys, and got out without an incident. We're anchored behind a big rock right now called something K.
Bay Key.
But it's completely different than when we went in. We get in, it looks like the Bahamas. You can see the bottom in 20 feet, and it's all beautiful. And now it looks like we're in a milkshake.
Yeah, all the water got shaken up with the hurricane.
And it's sloppy and crappy and bumpy out here.
Which sucks because we can't make water now.
We'll be able to make water when we get to the other side of the Turks and Caicos, because that's where the ocean comes in. This is where it goes out.
Yes. So, now that we're like 15 or 20 minutes into the video, that's the locations and the current conditions for you. And we're okay. We survived the hurricane and all that sort of stuff. This is part 1 of 2 of our adventure log this month. We're going to talk about how much we spent and the best and worst parts of the month and all the projects and everything. We'll do that in another video. But thanks for watching this video. Sorry, it's going to take another week before we can put this up because we're leaving internet tomorrow. But
We've got a
thank
lot
you.
more to cross to get to where it's safe.
Yep.
Basically, if you see this, we're okay.
If you see this video,
If you don't
uploaded,
see this,
it
well,
means
we're dead.
safely with internet somewhere. But all of our Patreons, thank you for supporting our channel for $1 or whatever you give us
Yep.
a month. And we're posting real time, day by day, kind of diary entries about
So you
where
guys
we are.
know what's happened.
So you probably already know where we are at this time.
Sorry we're so confused. We're just exhausted. It's been a rough time, and sleep has been rare.
What's sleep? All right, so that's it, part 1. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for part 2. Thanks, guys.